verse number 20. Chakram nadish diksvi avihatam dasasu swatejo. Manvantaresu manuvam sataro vibharti. Dustesu raja sudamam vyadadat swakirtim. Sadye triprista usatim pratayam charitrai. Translation: as the incarnation of Manu, the Lord became the descendant of the Manu dynasty and ruled over the miscreant kingly order, subduing them by his powerful wheel weapon. Undeterred in all circumstances, his rule was characterized by his glorious fame, which spread over the three lokas and above them to the planetary system of Satyaloka, the topmost in the universe. What? Yes, yesterday. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. We have already discussed the incarnations of Manu in the first canto. In one day of Brahma, there are 14 Manus, changing one after another. In that way, there are 420 Manus in a month of Brahma, and 5,040 Manus in 1 year of Brahma. Brahma lives for 100 years, according to his calculation, and as such, there are 504,000 Manus. And 504 504,000 Manus in the jurisdiction of one Brahma. There are innumerable Brahmas, and all of them live only during one breathing period of Mahavishnu. So we can just imagine how the incarnations of the Supreme Lord work all over the material worlds, which comprehend only 1/4 of the total energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Dhanvantari incarnation chastises all the miscreant rulers of different planets and with as much power as that of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who punishes the miscreants with his wheel weapon. The Dhanvantari incarnations disseminate the transcendental glories of the Lord. Srimad Bhagvatam, Canto 2, Chapter 7, verse text 21. Dhanvantarischa Bhagavan Swayam Eva Kirtir Namnan Rinam Puru Rujam Ruja Asuhanti Yagnecha Bhagam Amritayur Avavarudra Arundra Ayushvedam Anusasthyavatirya Loke. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. The Lord, in his incarnation of Dhanvantari, very quickly cures the diseases of the ever-diseased living entities simply by his fame personified, and only because of him do the demigods achieve long lives. Thus the Personality of Godhead becomes ever glorified. He also extracted a share from the sacrifices, and it is he only who inaugurated the medical science or the knowledge of medicine in the universe. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. As stated in the beginning of the Srimad Bhagvatam, everything emanates from the ultimate source of the Personality of Godhead. It is therefore understood in this verse that medical science or knowledge in medicine was also inaugurated by the Personality of Godhead in his incarnation, Dhanvantari. And thus the knowledge is recorded in the Vedas. The Vedas are the source of all knowledge. And thus knowledge in medical science is also there for the perfect cure of the diseases of the living entity. The embodied living entity is diseased by the very construction of his body. The body is the symbol of the diseases. The disease may differ from one variety to another, but disease must be there, just as there is birth, death, and death for everyone. So, By the grace of the Personality of Godhead, not only are diseases of the body and mind cured, but also the soul is relieved of the constant repetition of birth and death. The name of the Lord is also Bhavoshadi, or the source of curing the disease of material existence. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. The Lord in his incarnation, Dhanvantari, very quickly cures the diseases of the ever-diseased living entities simply by his fame personified, and only because of him do the demigods achieve long lives. Thus, the Personality of Godhead becomes ever glorified. He also exacted a share from the sacrifices, and it is he only who inaugurated the medical science or the knowledge of medicine in the universe. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So Dhanvantari appeared when the ocean of milk was churned by the demigods and the asuras by using the celestial snake Vasuki as a rope and using the Manvantara mountain, and of course Krishna appeared in this amazing tortoise incarnation. It was 800,000 miles long. You can imagine how big the mountain was. And the tortoise had an itch on its shell that he couldn't scratch. So by churning the mountain or back and forth using the snake, it satisfied the itching of the Lord's back, and at the same time churned the ocean, and so many things came out of the ocean. And many incarnations came out of the ocean, but one particular one was Dhanvantari, the celestial, let's say, doctor, who used only herbs to heal people and some metals. And he's written a book which is called Dhanvantari Nigantu, which is a rare book. Sometimes you can find it. And he explains all the different herbs that he used and metals that he used to make different concoctions for healing people. And of course, he came out of the ocean with a kamandalu full of amrit, the elixir of immortality, that was stolen by the asuras and then and then Mohini Murti, a very special incarnation of Krishna as an exquisitely beautiful woman, appeared and tricked the asuras and took the nectar back on the plea of equally distributing it to the devas and the asuras, but actually she gave it only to the devas, and there was none left for the asuras. So that's a great history. But what is interesting is the science of Ayurveda, which was given by Dhanvantari. He's the founder of it. And due to Dhanvantari, this science is still prevalent today, and it's codified in the Vedas, and in this book also by Dhanvantari called the Nigantu, and still practiced today. So we see that the Vedas are the source of all knowledge, whether it's spiritual knowledge or practical material knowledge, to prolong the life of the devas and also to help people become free of diseases. Well, the body itself is a disease. It's the symbol of disease because the body is very prone to getting sick. And just like we have this coronavirus, it's attacking so many people. Just a devotee, a disciple of Prabhupada died today in England of COVID. There are people dying all over the place of this disease. And the Ayurveda is so powerful that it can, if you practice it properly, it can rejuvenate an old person and make him young again. It can even bring back a dead person to life. And there are many examples of this. And one example is in the ninth canto of Srimad Bhagvatam, and it's the story of Chayavana Muni. There was a king. One day he decided to take his whole retinue of soldiers and family members to a holy site where there was a great sage who was meditating. So they go to this sage's ashram, but they don't see the sage. And so they spend a day there because it's a holy place. And the king's daughter, whose name was Sukanya, she and her attendants are walking around the ashram, and she sees a mound, and she's looking at it and observing it, and she sees two glowing objects that are in the crust of that mound, and she's trying to figure out what it is. So she gets a blade of a straw and sticks it into one of the holes and pierces that glowing object, and blood comes out, and she gets frightened and runs away. But as soon as she pierced that glowing object in the crust of that mound, everybody became constipated, and they couldn't pass stool and urine. Thereupon all the soldiers of Saryati, that's the king, and he's the father of Sukanya, were immediately obstructed from passing urine and stool. Upon perceiving this, Saryati, the king, spoke to his associates in surprise. How strange it is that one of us has attempted to do something wrong to Chayavana Muni, the son of Bhrigu. It certainly appears that someone among us has polluted this ashram. He was a smart king. And that whenever you get constipated, you can't pass stool and urine. It's a serious issue. Right? And right away, they're in a holy place, and this inauspicious thing happens. So he figured out, just by observation and knowledge, that somehow or other they must have insulted Chayavana Muni, even though they don't even see him. Being very much afraid, the girl Sukanya said to her father, I have done something wrong, for I have ignorantly pierced these two luminous substances with a thorn. After hearing this statement by his daughter, King Saryati was very much afraid. In various ways he tried to appease Chayavana Muni, for it was he who sat within the hole of the earthworms. So he's meditating for so long that this mound it develops and envelops him. But his two eyes were glowing, and she was able to see them. She didn't know what it was. She thought it was like an earthworm or something, or some kind of bright insect. And she pierces it, and actually it's his eyes. And he starts, and then blood comes out. After hearing this statement by his daughter, King Saryati was very much afraid. In various ways, he tried to appease Chayavana Muni, for it was he who sat within the hole of the earthworms. King Saryati, being very contemplative and thus understanding Chayavana Muni's purpose. Oh, okay, so understanding Chayavana Muni's purpose. Okay, wait a minute. King Saryati being very contemplative, and thus understanding Chayavana Muni's purpose, gave his daughter in charity to the sage. Thus released from danger, with great difficulty, he took permission from Chayavana Muni and returned home. So in the purport, Prabhupada says, the king, Saryati, after hearing the statement of his daughter, certainly told the great sage Chayavana Muni everything about how his daughter had ignorantly committed such an offense. The Muni, however, inquired from the king whether the daughter was married. In this way, the king, understanding the purpose of the great sage Chayavana Muni, tad abhiprayam agyaya, immediately gave the Muni his daughter in charity and escaped the danger of being cursed. Thus, with the permission of the great sage, the king returned home. Well, he leaves his daughter there with this very old sage. He was a very old man, but he was still interested in some young woman. We see this even in ISKCON. There's oftentimes disciples of Srila Prabhupada who are like 60, 70, 75, 80 years old, and they've already been married and they have children and grandchildren. They want to get married again. See. So anyway, Chayavana Muni was very irritable, but since Sukanya had gotten him as her husband, she dealt with him carefully, according to his mood. Knowing his mind, she performed service to him without being bewildered. So she's a young, beautiful girl, and he's old in many ways. You know, he has flaccid skin. Flaccid skin means it's like there's no more muscle. It's become like very soft and wrinkled all over his body, and so he's got gray hair and so many things. There's signs of great aging, but still she remained very humble and tried to understand him. Although he was irritable, he was fast to get angry. So in the purport, this is an amazing purport. This is why we're hearing this story today. This is an indication. This is Prabhupada writing, right? This is an indication of the relationship between husband and wife. A great personality like Chayavana Muni has the temperament of always wanting to be in a superior position. Such a person cannot submit to anyone. Therefore, Chayavana Muni had an irritable temperament. His wife, Sukanya, could understand his attitude, and under the circumstances, she treated him accordingly. If any wife wants to be happy with her husband, she must try to understand her husband's temperament and please him. This is victory for a woman. Even in the dealings of Lord Krishna with his different queens, it has been seen that although the queens were the daughters of great kings, they placed themselves before Lord Krishna as his maidservants. However great a woman may be, she must place herself before her husband in this way. That is to say, she must be ready to carry out her husband's orders and please him in all circumstances. Then her life will be successful. When the wife becomes as irritable as the husband, their life at home is sure to be disturbed or ultimately completely broken. In the modern day, the wife is never submissive, and therefore home life is broken even by slight incidents. Either the wife or the husband may take advantage of the divorce laws. According to Vedic law, however, there is no such thing as divorce laws, and a woman must be trained to be submissive to the will of her husband. Westerners contend that this is a slave mentality for the wife, but factually it is not. It is the tactic by which a woman can conquer the heart of her husband, however irritable or cruel he may be. In this case, we clearly see that although Chayavana Muni was not young, but indeed old enough to be Sukanya's grandfather, and was also irritable, Sukanya, the beautiful young daughter of a king, submitted herself to her old husband and tried to please him in all respects. Thus, she was a faithful and chaste wife. Well, this is a lot of information here that completely goes against the the craw. The craw is a word. It's like means the throat, of modern women. They all want to be, equal and not submissive, and they're quickly irritated, and all these things, and the complaining, and so forth. But here we have an example of a really chaste woman, even though she has an old man as her husband, and he's irritable. But yet, she knows how to please him and keep him happy. See? And this way, she actually is victorious. And Prabhupada says here, it is the tactic by which a woman can conquer the heart of her husband, however irritable or cruel he may be. In this case, we clearly see that although Chayavana Muni was not young, but indeed old enough to be Sukanya's grandfather, and was also very irritable, Sukanya, the beautiful young daughter of a king, submitted herself to her old husband and tried to please him in all respects. Thus, she was a faithful and chaste wife. Okay, so then next it says, thereafter some time having passed, the Asvini Kumara brothers, the heavenly physicians of the demigods, happened to come to Chayavana Muni's ashrama. After offering them respectful obeisances, Chayavana Muni requested them to give him youthful life, for they were able to do so. So the Asvini Kumars are also Ayurvedic doctors, like Dhanvantari. And they're the doctors of the demigods. But they themselves are not full-bred demigods. They're lower, very lower in the scale of powers and position. The heavenly physicians, like the Asvini Kumars, could give youthful life even to one who was advanced in age. Indeed, great yogis, with their mystic powers, can even bring a dead body back to life if the structure of the body is in order. In other words, if it has not been mutilated, they can bring it back to life. We have already discussed this in connection with Bali Maharaj's soldiers and their treatment by Sukracharya. They were killed by the Devas, but Sukracharya brought them all back to life again with his Sanjivani, I guess it's an herb, or a concoction. I'm not sure if it's an herb or a concoction. Modern medical science has not yet discovered how to bring a dead body back to life or bring youthful energy to an old body. But from these verses, we can understand that such treatment is possible if one is able to take knowledge from the Vedic information. The Asvini Kumaras were expert in Ayurveda, as was Dhanvantari. So this book by Dhanvantari, what is it called? Dhanvantari Nigantu. I'm going to buy that book. I found one. It's hard to get, but I found one. I want to see, and I saw parts of it. It gives a whole list of herbs and metals that Dhanvantari used to make his concoctions to heal people. Very interesting. So, the Asvini Kumars were expert in Ayurveda, as was Dhanvantari. In every department of material science, there is a perfection to be achieved, and to achieve it, one must consult the Vedic literature. The highest perfection is to become a devotee of the Lord. To attain this perfection, one must consult Srimad Bhagvatam, which is understood to be the ripe fruit of the Vedic desire tree, Nigama Kalpataror Galitam Phalam. So, some people want to read the Vedas. It's most of the Ayurveda is explained in the Atharva Veda, and they want to read this and find out, how to heal things, heal people, and so forth. But the real healing is Srimad Bhagavatam. The highest perfection is to become a devotee of the Lord. That's much better than becoming an Ayurvedic doctor. To attain this perfection, one must consult Srimad Bhagvatam, which is understood to be the ripe fruit of the Vedic desire tree. Nigama kalpatarur galitam phalam. Chayavana Muni said, although you are ineligible to drink somarasa in sacrifices, he's talking to the Ashwini Kumars because they're not full-blood demigods, right? So he's saying, you guys, you're not allowed to drink the somarasa. See, now, where do you get the somarasa? You go to the moon and get the somarasa. Of course, Jeff Bezos with his SpaceX, even if he goes to the moon, he won't see the somarasa, he won't see the Ashwini Kumars, he won't see anything. He'll just see some dirt and craters, that's about it. You know, and then he'll say, oh, well, there's nothing here, like, let's go to Mars next, you know. It's all nonsense. They're not going to the moon and they're not going to Mars either. You know, it's just a bunch of hooey, as they say in English. Well, he says, although you are ineligible to drink somarasa in sacrifices, every time you drink a cup of somarasa, it increases your life 10,000 years, and your strength and your vitality. You know. I promise to give you a full pot of it, he says. Kindly arrange beauty and youth for me because they are attractive to young women. Whoa. Now we know why there's plastic surgery and Botox and all that nonsense. The great physicians, the Ashwini Kumars, very gladly accepted Chayavana Muni's proposal. Thus they told the Brahmana, just dive into this lake of successful life. One who bathes in this lake has his desires fulfilled. Well, yes. So there are certain waters that are elixirs for not immortality, but for prolonging life. You have to know where they are. So there was such a lake near Chayavana Muni's ashram. By the way, Chayavana Muni, right? Have you heard of Chawan Paras? That comes from Chayavana Muni. It's named after him because the Ashwini Kumars apparently gave him some Chayavana Prash, and it's still being made today. Of course, whether it's being made correctly or not, we don't know. You know, there's so many different, you know, like, what's the name? Is that Babur or, huh? Dabur, yeah. Dabur claims to make the real one. We don't really know if it's for real. But it has a lot of, Chawan Pras has a lot of amla in it. At least 50% of it is amla, and then the rest is another plethora of about 20, 30, 40, 50 other things, including gold. You know, and the basis of it is amla and ghee, and then all these other herbs and some gold, and, you know, that's why the Nigantu, the Dhanvantari's Nigantu, gives a whole list of herbs and metals that are used in Ayurveda for healing people. And also there's other things too. There's mantras. It's not just physical things like herbs and metals. There's also mantras. The highest, see, there's 3 levels of healing, or so-called healing. So number 1, in the West, they use poisons. You know, like it's called allopathic medicine. Actually, they're poisons, but they're dosed in different, let's say, percentages, so as not to kill the person, but to kill the disease. Right. So that's Asuric medicine, and then there's Ayurveda, which is based on herbs. So that is what you would call Deva medicine, right? And then there's mantras, which is transcendental. So you can heal people with mantras also. And that's the best healing. Okay, so The great physicians, the Ashwini Kumars, very gladly accepted Chayavana Muni's proposal. Thus they told the Brahmana, just dive into this lake of successful life. One who bathes in this lake has his desires fulfilled. Okay. So the next verse says, after saying this, the Ashwini Kumars caught hold of Chayavana Muni, who was an old, diseased invalid, with loose skin, white hair, and veins visible all over his body, and all three of them entered the lake. Chayavana Muni was so old that he could not enter the lake alone. Thus, the Ashwini Kumars caught hold of his body, and the three of them entered the lake. So he's so old that he can't even walk, right? And his skin is flaccid, it's soft and flabby, and it's wrinkled, and it's gray hair and mustaches and beard and everything. So he was a mess. Thereafter, three men with very beautiful bodily features emerged from the lake. They were nicely dressed and decorated with earrings and garlands of lotuses. All of them were of the same standard of beauty. Hey, I want to find where that lake is. There is a lake like that somewhere. We have to find where Chayavana Muni's ashram was. The chaste and very beautiful Sukanya could not distinguish her husband from the two Ashwini Kumars. So they come back to Chayavana's ashram, I guess, and Sukanya sees these three very handsome, healthy, beautiful men, and she's a little bit confused. And not understanding who her real husband was, she took shelter of the Ashwini Kumars. So Sukanya could have selected any one of them as her husband, for one could not distinguish among them. But because she was chaste, she took shelter of the Ashwini Kumars so that they could inform her who her actual husband was. A chaste woman will never accept any man other than her husband, even if there be someone equally as handsome and qualified. We see, the glories of a chaste woman. The Ashwini Kumars were very pleased to see Sukanya's chastity and faithfulness. Thus they showed her Chayavana Muni, her husband, and after taking permission from him, they returned to the heavenly planets in their plane. So they had an airplane, a Vimana. Thereafter, King Saryati, desiring to perform a sacrifice, went to the residence of Chayavana Muni. There he saw by the side of his daughter a very beautiful young man, as bright as the sun. After receiving obeisances from his daughter, the king, instead of offering blessings to her, appeared very displeased and spoke as follows. "O unchaste girl, what is this that you have desired to do? You have cheated the most respectable husband, who is honored by everyone. For I see that because he was old, diseased, and therefore unattractive, you have left his company to accept as your husband this young man who appears to be a beggar from the street." So in the purport, Prabhupada writes, this shows the values of Vedic culture. According to the circumstances, Sukanya had been given a husband who was too old to be compatible with her. Because Chayavana Muni was diseased and very old, he was certainly unfit for the beautiful daughter of King Saryati. Nonetheless, her father expected her to be faithful to her husband. When he suddenly saw that his daughter had accepted someone else, even though the man was young and handsome, he immediately chastised her as asati, unchaste, because he assumed that she had accepted another man in the presence of her husband. According to Vedic culture, even if a young woman is given an old husband, she must respectfully serve him. This is chastity. It is not that because she dislikes her husband, she may give him up and accept another. This is against Vedic culture. According to Vedic culture, a woman must accept the husband given to her by her parents and remain chaste and faithful to him. Therefore, King Saryati was surprised to see a young man by the side of Sukanya. This is an explanation here of Vedic culture. Now, of course, the Taliban do similar type of things. They marry old men to child brides. Now, is that the same thing? No, it's not exactly the same thing. There's a big difference between the Taliban and Shayavana Muni, right? But that's going on in Afghanistan right now. And you have these girls that are like 12 or 10 or 8 years old. They get married to a guy who's old enough to be their great-grandfather. And they expect the daughter to be, the family of the daughter expects her to be completely chaste and dedicated to him and never get involved with any other man. That happens in Afghanistan and other Arab countries or Muslim countries. But, you know, they do all kinds of crazy things, though. Like, for example, there's genital mutilation, so that a woman cannot experience any orgasm or any pleasure out of sex. So that's another thing. It's very, very prevalent in Africa amongst the Muslims. And also, if a woman is not chaste, if she gets involved with another man, although she's married, they kill her. They bury her up to her head, and they throw stones at her head until she's dead. And if a woman or a child, a young girl, gets raped, it's the fault of the woman. It's not the fault of the man, and they prosecute the woman. So these things are happening under Sharia law in Muslim countries. But they take it to an extreme, a fanatical extreme. It's not, whether it's actually Sharia law or not, that's another question. You know, but sometimes there's a very fanatical interpretation of Sharia law, and you get these type of aberrant things that happen. But even in Vedic culture, we see that women must be submissive to their husband, even if the husband is cruel. But if they read this carefully, they'll see that Sukanya was an ideal chaste wife, even though her husband was a very old man. Okay, so we'll stop right there and finish this tomorrow. Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhakati Sadma Bando Mui Savadana Mate Janara Prasade Bhai He Bhavatoriya Jai Krishna Prapti Hoya Hoite Guru Mukha Padma Vakya Chitte Koriya Arana Koriya Mane Asa Shri Guru Charane Rati Aise Utamagati Prasade Pure Salva Asa Chakshudan lila jai janme janme Prabhu se. Chakshudan lila jai janme janme Prabhu se. Divya Gyani de Prakashito. Divya Gyani de Prakashito. Prema Bhakti Jaha Hoite Avidya Vinasajate. Prema Bhakti Jaha Hoite Avidya Vinasajate. Vede Gai Janara Charito. Shri Guru Karuna Sindhu Adana Janara Bandhu. Lokena Lokera Jivana. Ha ha Prabhu Kora Doya Deya More Padachaya. Ebe Askushikti Bhuvana. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare. Haribo, 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 Haribo. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Pararajika Charasthatara Shri Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Goswami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Anantakoti Vaishnavinda ki jai. Namacharyas Srila Harivilas Maharaj ki jai. Prem Shri Goho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasudeva Gaura Bhaktivinoda Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Samakunda Radha Kunda Giri Godan ki jai. Shri Vrindavan Dham Mayapura Dham ki jai, Jagannath Puri Dham ki jai, Tulasi Devi ki jai, Bhakti Devi ki jai, Ganga Maya ki jai, Jamuna Maya ki jai, Samaveda Bhakti Vinda ki jai, Nitai Gauda Premananda. All glories to someone, all glories to someone, all glories to someone, all glories to Shri Guru and Shri Guru, all glories to Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Vasudaya Namaste Saraswati Devi. Let's get this. Haribo, Haribo, Haribo. the lotus feet of our spiritual master, the only way by which we can attain pure devotional service. Bow down to his lotus feet, great one reverence. By his grace, one can cross the ocean of material suffering and obtain the mercy of Krishna. My only wish is to have my consciousness purified by the words emanating from his lotus mouth. Attachment to his lotus feet is perfection and fulfills all desires. He opens my darkened eyes and fills my heart with transcendental knowledge. He is my Lord, birth after birth. From him, ecstatic prema emanates. By him, ignorance is destroyed. The Vedic scriptures sing of his character. Our spiritual master is the ocean of mercy, friend of the poor, and Lord and master of the devotees. O master, your fame is spread to all through the worlds. We take shelter of your lotus feet. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutali Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami. Namaste Saraswati Devi Guru Vani Puja. Srila Prabhupada Patita Pavani ki jai.